My name is Marin Holloway, and exactly 43 days ago, my 10-year-old son looked straight into my eyes and asked a question that made me realize someone had been stealing my life for months. He smiled politely, stepped backward, and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. My mom is already here." I laughed because I thought he was joking. Then another woman walked across the school parking lot, and Noah ran into her arms without looking back at me once. If I hadn't found what was hidden inside his school locker 3 days later, no one would have believed I was ever his mother. People always say your life can change in a single phone call. I used to think that was something people only said in movies. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang while I was finishing paperwork at my father's accounting firm in downtown Chicago. The caller ID flashed Oak Ridge Elementary School. Noah had never caused trouble before, so I answered with a smile, expecting another reminder about a field trip or forgotten lunch money. Instead, the secretary sounded confused. "Mrs. Holloway, are you coming to pick Noah up today?" I frowned. "Of course. I'm leaving right now." There was a long silence before she quietly replied, "That's strange." "Because someone already called saying you were running late." My stomach tightened. "Who called?" I asked. Paper slipped from my hands as I stood up from my desk. "A woman," she answered. "She said she was Noah's mother." I laughed awkwardly. "I am Noah's mother." Another silence followed. This one felt heavier. "Well," the secretary whispered. She sounded exactly like someone who knew everything about him. I grabbed my car keys so fast they slipped onto the floor. The 20-minute drive felt endless. Every traffic light stayed red. Every second made my heart beat louder. By the time I reached the school parking lot, children were already leaving with their parents. Noah was nowhere in sight. I rushed inside, expecting someone to apologize for the misunderstanding. Instead, every staff member looked at me with the same puzzled expression. Principal Owen Barrett walked toward me with folded arms. "Mrs. Holloway." I thought Noah already left. I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "I came as soon as I got your call." He frowned. "A woman arrived 15 minutes ago." Noah recognized her immediately. He hugged her, called her mom, and walked away smiling. The room spun around me. "That's impossible," I whispered. "You're mistaken." But nobody answered. Instead, the receptionist slowly turned her computer monitor toward me. On the security camera freeze frame, I saw Noah standing beside a woman I had never seen before. She was holding his backpack. Noah's hand was comfortably wrapped around hers. And on his face, there wasn't even a hint of fear. My knees nearly gave out. I knew every expression my son had ever made. That smile wasn't forced. It wasn't confused. It was the smile he used only when he felt completely safe. I whispered one sentence that nobody in that office could answer. "If that's his mother, then who have I been raising for the last 10 years? As Principal Barrett replayed the security footage frame by frame, something appeared for less than 2 seconds behind Noah and the mysterious woman. A school locker door was slightly open, and inside it was a family photo that shouldn't have existed. I couldn't stop staring at the security footage. The woman held Noah's hand like she'd done it 1,000 times before, and Noah never looked uncomfortable, not for a single second. He laughed at something she said, adjusted his backpack, and walked out of the school beside her as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I kept waiting for him to look back, to notice I wasn't there, to hesitate. He never did. I whispered, "Can you play it again?" Principal Barrett replayed the footage. Then again, and again. Every time the ending was exactly the same. Noah willingly left with a woman I'd never seen in my life. "I want every camera angle you have," I said. Principal Barrett hesitated. "Marin, are you sure you don't know her?" I looked at him in disbelief. "I've never seen that woman before today." He slowly frowned. "That's strange." "Why?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable before answering. "Because several teachers recognized her." My heart stopped. "Recognized her?" He nodded. "They said she's picked Noah up. Before." For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. That's impossible. Our records show she's been listed as an emergency contact. I froze. What records? He opened Noah's student profile on the computer. My eyes immediately went to the emergency contacts section. My own name was there, but underneath it was another name I'd never seen before. Celeste Rowan, relationship mother. I grabbed the mouse so hard my knuckles turned white. Who added this? The principal clicked through the history log. About 8 months ago. I never approved this. He looked genuinely confused. According to our system, you signed the authorization yourself. I felt like the room had become too small to breathe in. My signature was sitting at the bottom of the digital form. It looked perfect. Every letter, every curve. It was identical to mine, except I knew I had never signed it. This is forged, I whispered. Principal Barrett rubbed the back of his neck. Marin, our software verifies identity before accepting signatures. I looked him straight in the eyes. Then your software was fooled. Before leaving his office, I asked one more question. Can I see Noah's locker? He hesitated for a moment before handing me a master key. It's still inside classroom B. I walked down the quiet hallway alone. Every classroom was empty. Children's artwork still covered the walls, but the building suddenly felt cold, almost unfamiliar. I stopped in front of locker 214. Noah had decorated it himself at the beginning of the school year. At least, that's what I thought. The key clicked. I slowly opened the locker. At first, everything looked normal. His math book, his science folder, his baseball cap. Then I noticed a small white envelope taped behind the top shelf. My name wasn't on it. Instead, written in blue ink were 4 simple words. For Mom, don't forget. My heart softened for just a second. I smiled, thinking Noah had hidden me a surprise. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handmade Mother's Day card. The handwriting was definitely Noah's. The little stick figure drawing looked exactly like the ones he always made, but the woman standing beside him wasn't me. She had long, dark hair, a green coat, and underneath the drawing, Noah had written, I love you, Mom. Thank you for saving me. I couldn't breathe. That wasn't my birthday. That wasn't my Mother's Day. That wasn't even my face. As I turned the card over, something slipped onto the floor. It was an old family. Photograph. Noah, my ex-husband Gavin, and the same mysterious woman standing together in front of our old house. The date printed in the corner made my blood run cold. It had been taken 2 years ago. I stared at it in complete shock. Because 2 years ago, Gavin and I were still happily married. When I zoomed in on the photograph later that night, I noticed someone standing inside the upstairs bedroom window, watching all 4 of them. And that person looked exactly like me. I must have stared at that photograph for 10 straight minutes. Every time I looked away, I convinced myself I was imagining it. Then I'd zoom in again, and she'd still be there. Upstairs, standing behind the bedroom window. A woman with my height, my hairstyle, even the same light blue sweater I used to wear every fall. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. It looked like me, but that couldn't be possible. The picture showed Noah, Gavin, and that mysterious woman smiling in the front yard while someone who looked exactly like me watched from inside the house. There was only one problem. On the day that picture was supposedly taken, I was in Boston attending a 3-day accounting conference. I still had the hotel receipts. I drove home with the photograph sitting on the passenger seat, unable to stop glancing at it. Every red light felt longer than usual. Every car behind me seemed too close. By the time I reached the house, I wasn't even thinking clearly anymore. I unlocked the front door, walked straight upstairs, and opened the bedroom closet. Inside was an old storage box where I kept family albums. My hands shook as I searched for the photos from 2 years earlier. Within minutes, I found the album from that summer. Every single picture was gone. Not one, not two. Every photograph from the month printed on the mystery picture had disappeared. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them, so I searched every drawer, every cabinet, every storage bin in the house. Nothing. It was as if someone had carefully removed only those specific memories and left everything else untouched. Then I remembered something. Gavin. After our divorce, he'd insisted on keeping all the digital backups of our family photos. At the time, I didn't argue. I trusted him. Now, for the first time, that decision terrified me. I called him immediately. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Marin." His voice sounded calm, too calm. "Gavin, I need to ask you something." "What happened?" "Who is Celeste Rowan?" The silence on the other end lasted nearly 10 seconds. Then he laughed. Not because something was funny, because someone had caught him off guard. "I don't know anyone by that name." I looked down at the photograph. "You've been photographed with her." Another pause. "What photograph?" "The one where she's standing beside Noah in front of our house." His breathing changed. Just slightly. But I noticed. "Marin, where did you get that picture?" "So you do know it?" "No." "I asked where you got it." "Answer my question first." Another long silence, finally. "I can't explain this over the phone." My stomach dropped. "There is something to explain." "I'll come over tonight." "No, I'm coming now." Before I could stop him, he hung up. Less than 20 minutes later, Gavin pulled into my driveway. The moment he stepped inside, I handed him the photograph. The color drained from his face. He whispered one sentence so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I thought I destroyed every copy." I felt the room spin. "You destroyed them?" He immediately realized what he'd admitted. "Marin, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what to think." He sat down heavily on the couch, rubbing both hands across his face. "For the last 2 years, I've been trying to protect you." I laughed bitterly. "By lying to me?" "No. By keeping you alive." Every hair on my arm stood up. "What does that mean?" He looked directly into my eyes. "The woman in that picture doesn't want your son. She wants your identity." Before I could ask another question, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. Almost deliberate. I walked toward the window and carefully pulled the curtain aside. Standing on my front porch, holding a bouquet of white lilies, was Celeste Rowan. She smiled directly at my window, as if she already knew I was watching. When I opened the front door, Celeste looked at me, smiled warmly, and said 7 words that made my blood freeze. "It's so nice to finally meet the other Marin." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The woman standing on my front porch looked completely relaxed, as if she'd been invited over for coffee. She smiled politely, holding the bouquet of white lilies against her chest, and repeated the same sentence. "It's so nice to finally meet the other Marin." My entire body froze. Gavin immediately stood between us. "Close the door." But I couldn't move. I kept staring at her face. She wasn't trying to look like me. She had different hair, different eyes, even a different voice. Yet somehow she spoke my name as if she'd owned it for years. Celeste tilted her head and smiled sympathetically. "You look exhausted." Gavin's voice turned sharp. "Leave." She ignored him completely. Instead, she looked directly at me. "Marin, haven't you wondered why Noah didn't recognize you today?" My heart sank. "Don't say his name," she sighed. "You still think this is about stealing your son." Then she slowly placed the flowers on my front step. "It never was." I frowned. "Then what do you want?" Her answer came so calmly it frightened me more than if she'd screamed, "Your life." Before I could respond, Gavin slammed the front door shut. He locked it, checked the windows, and pulled every curtain closed. I'd never seen him panic like that before. "We have to leave." I stared at him. "You're finally going to explain everything." He shook his head. "Not here." "No." My voice cracked. "No more secrets." He looked at me for several seconds before quietly saying, She chooses people who already have the perfect life. Then she slowly replaces them. I laughed in disbelief. That's insane. I know how it sounds. No, Gavin. I pointed toward the door. That woman somehow convinced my son she's his mother, forged documents, and walked into his school. That's already insane. So stop giving me pieces of the story. He took a deep breath. 2 years ago, Celeste met me at a charity fundraiser. I stayed silent. She introduced herself as a consultant who specialized in family counseling. And she asked hundreds of questions about our marriage. About Noah. About you. At the time, it all seemed harmless. He swallowed hard. I didn't realize she was studying us. Every word made me more uncomfortable. Studying us? She memorized everything. Your birthday. Your favorite coffee. The stories Noah loved before bed. The songs you sang in the car. Everything. I felt sick. You're telling me she spent years learning how to become me? He nodded slowly. And by the time I realized what she was doing, other people already believed her. I stared at him in complete disbelief. That's impossible. I thought so too. Then Gavin walked upstairs and returned carrying an old cardboard box I'd never seen before. I've hidden this since the divorce. Inside were dozens of notebooks. Every single one was filled with handwritten notes. Page after page. Date after date, schedules, family routines. Noah's medical history. My work meetings. Favorite restaurants. Friends' birthdays. Even arguments Gavin and I had inside our own house. Somebody had documented our lives in terrifying detail. Then I opened the last notebook. Across the top of the page, written in black ink, were 5 words. Becoming Maren Holloway, final phase. I couldn't stop staring at it. Every page after that described me. Not generally, precisely, how I laughed. How I crossed my arms. How I answered the phone. How I signed my name. How I comforted Noah after nightmares. It wasn't a diary. It was an instruction manual. Someone had literally been practicing how to become me. Before I could process what I was reading, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. 1 text message. 1 photograph. It showed Noah sleeping peacefully in his bedroom. Today's newspaper was lying beside him. At the bottom was a message. He still believes I'm his mother. And tomorrow, everyone else will too. As I looked at the photo one last time, I noticed something hidden on Noah's bedside table, a framed family picture where I no longer existed. I must have looked at that picture 100 times before my hands finally stopped shaking. Noah was sleeping peacefully in his own bed, hugging the stuffed bear I'd bought him on his 6th birthday. Everything in the room looked familiar, except the framed photograph on his nightstand. It showed Noah smiling between Gavin and Celeste. There was no empty space where I had been cropped out. There was no sign that someone had edited the image. It looked completely natural, as if I'd never existed in that family at all. I whispered, "This isn't possible." Gavin looked at the screen and slowly closed his eyes. "She's almost finished." I turned toward him. "Finished with what?" His answer came quietly. "Replacing every memory of you." I refused to believe it. There had to be a logical explanation. Fake documents made sense. Forged signatures made sense. Even manipulated security footage was possible. But changing everyone's memories? That wasn't real. It couldn't be. So I decided to prove Gavin wrong. I called the one person who had known me longer than anyone else besides my parents, my college roommate, Rachel Monroe. Rachel answered immediately. "Hey, it's been forever." Relief washed over me, finally. Someone normal. "Rachel," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to ask you something strange." She laughed. "When have you ever asked normal questions?" I forced a smile. "Who's Noah's mother?" There was a pause. Then she answered without hesitation. "Celeste, obviously." "Why?" My heart stopped. I couldn't speak. Rachel continued. "Didn't you tell me you were helping Gavin after the divorce?" I always thought it was nice that you stayed close to Noah even though he wasn't biologically yours. My knees nearly gave out. Rachel, my voice cracked. I've been Noah's mother since the day he was born. She laughed awkwardly. Marin, are you okay? I ended the call without another word. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room. Rachel had been in the delivery room with me. She held Noah before almost anyone else. She was the one who took our first family picture. How could she suddenly believe I'd never been his mother? Before I could even process that thought, my phone rang again. This time, it was my own mother. I answered immediately. Mom, she sounded worried. Marin, sweetheart. Are you all right? Tears filled my eyes. Mom, tell me something. Anything. She laughed softly. What is it? Who's Noah's mother? Silence. Long, painful. Silence. Finally, she answered. I thought we agreed not to bring that up anymore. My entire body went numb. What are you talking about? Honey, I know it hurt when Gavin married Celeste. But Noah has always been her little boy. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. I couldn't hear anything anymore. Not Gavin shouting my name. Not the television. Not the traffic outside. Only one thought kept repeating inside my head. Even my own mother no longer remembered me. Gavin grabbed my shoulders. Marin! You have to listen to me. I looked at him with tears streaming down my face. Am I losing my mind? He shook his head violently. No. They're making everyone else lose theirs. Then he opened one final envelope he'd kept hidden beneath the notebooks. Inside was an official hospital document. Birth certificate. Mother, Celeste Rowan. Father, Gavin Holloway. I stared at it. The hospital logo was real. The doctor's signature was real. Even Noah's footprints were attached. Everything looked authentic, except I had been there. I had given birth to Noah. I remembered every second of it. Then something caught my eye. At the bottom of the certificate, hidden in tiny print, was the name of the hospital administrator who had approved the record. I whispered it out loud. R. Celeste Rowan. I looked up at Gavin. She approved her own birth certificate? His face turned pale. No, he whispered. That means she was already inside the hospital before Noah was even born. Just as we realized how deep the conspiracy really went, someone unlocked my front door from the outside. Using a key that only I was supposed to have, vidIQ. The sound of my front door unlocking froze both of us. I slowly turned toward the hallway. The deadbolt clicked. Then the handle slowly moved downward. Nobody knocked. Nobody announced themselves. They simply unlocked my house as if they belonged there. Gavin instinctively stepped in front of me. Stay behind me, he whispered. Every muscle in my body tightened as the door slowly opened. Standing there was Celeste Rowan, and she, wasn't alone. 2 uniformed police officers stood behind her. One of them smiled politely. Good evening. We received a welfare check. Request. I stared at him. I never called the police. He glanced at the clipboard. No, Mrs. Holloway. Did. I frowned. I am Mrs. Holloway. The officer looked confused before turning toward Celeste. She smiled warmly. No. Officer, I'm Marin Holloway. For a second, nobody spoke. The officer looked at me, then back at Celeste. Then at the documents she handed him. Driver's license, passport, marriage certificate. Every single document carried my name, Marin Elizabeth Holloway. The officer looked back at me. And you are... I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm Marin Holloway. Celeste sighed sadly. This is exactly what I warned you about. The officer frowned. What do you mean? She lowered her eyes. My sister has been struggling ever since my son was born. My heart stopped. Sister? I looked at Gavin. His face had turned white. Celeste continued speaking, so naturally it made me sick. She started believing Noah was her child. At First, it was harmless, but lately, she's become unpredictable. I couldn't even breathe. She wasn't just stealing my identity anymore. She was rewriting my entire life. The older police officer slowly stepped toward me. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to remain calm. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because I couldn't believe this was actually happening. You think I'm lying? The officer looked uncomfortable. We're just trying to understand the situation. I pointed directly at Celeste. Ask her where Noah was. Born, she answered immediately. Mercy, General Hospital. What room? 312. What doctor delivered him? Dr. Elaine Porter. Every answer came without hesitation. I asked another. What song did I sing to Noah every night before bed? She smiled. You'll never walk alone. My blood ran cold. That was true. Nobody knew that song except my family. The officers looked at each other. One quietly whispered, She knows everything, I shouted, because she stole everything. Before anyone could answer, Gavin suddenly stepped forward. Enough, everyone. Turned toward him, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. I've been carrying this for almost 2 years, he pressed. Play. Margaret Holloway's voice filled the living room. If you can convince the child, the adults become easy. Another voice laughed. Celeste. Children. Forget faster than parents, Margaret answered. That's why we start with the school. Then the recording ended. The silence afterward felt endless. The officers looked at each other again. This time, their expressions had changed. One of them slowly turned towards Celeste, ma'am. Would you mind explaining this recording? For the first time since I'd met her, Celeste stopped smiling. She looked at Gavin with pure hatred. You weren't supposed to keep that. Before anyone could react, she suddenly reached into her handbag. Thought so. Officers immediately reached for their weapons. Don't move! But Celeste wasn't holding a gun. She pulled out a small silver key. She looked directly at me, then quietly whispered, You still haven't figured out where Noah really is. My heart skipped. What? She smiled one last time. The little boy sleeping in that photograph was never inside his bedroom. Then she dropped the key onto my living room floor, turned around and willingly let the officers place her in handcuffs. As they led her outside, she looked over her shoulder and said the one sentence that shattered everything. I'd finally started believing. You've been looking for the wrong child this entire time. The moment the front door closed behind the police, Gavin picked up the silver key, looked at its engraved number, and whispered in absolute horror, This isn't a house key. It's a storage unit key. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Gavin stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the tiny silver key lying in his hand. The number engraved on it was simple. C117. There wasn't a company logo. There wasn't an address. Just that number. My voice barely came out. Where is it? Gavin swallowed hard. I don't know. I looked at him in disbelief. You just recognized it. He nodded. Because I've seen one exactly like it before. My heart began racing. Where? He slowly closed his eyes. In Celeste's purse. Almost a year ago. I grabbed my car keys before he could say another word. Then we're going. 40 minutes later, we arrived at a massive self-storage facility on the edge of the city. It was almost midnight. The place looked abandoned. Rows of gray metal buildings stretched into the darkness, lit only by flickering security lights. I handed the manager the key. He looked at the number and frowned. Unit C117. He checked the computer. Then his expression changed. That's strange. What? I asked. The rent has been paid every month for almost 3 years. Under whose name? He turned the monitor toward us. I felt my knees weaken. The account holder wasn't Celeste Rowan. It wasn't Gavin Holloway. It wasn't even my name. It was registered to Noah Holloway. My 10-year-old son had supposedly been renting a storage unit since he was 7. The manager unlocked the security gate and we slowly drove toward Building C. Every sound echoed through the empty facility. My heartbeat was louder than the engine. We finally stopped in front of Unit 117. The metal door looked untouched. No signs of forced entry. No dust around the lock. Gavin handed me the key. "You should do it." My fingers trembled so badly I missed the keyhole twice before finally turning it. The lock clicked. I pulled the heavy metal door upward. Inside. There wasn't furniture. There weren't boxes. There were walls. Freshly painted white walls. The storage unit had been transformed into a small apartment. A bed, a couch, a bookshelf, children's toys, family photographs. Everything looked lived in. I slowly walked inside. On the coffee table sat Noah's favorite blue dinosaur toy. The same one I'd spent 2 weeks searching for last Christmas. Beside it was a half-finished coloring book. The crayons were still scattered exactly as if a child had walked away only minutes earlier. Then I noticed the wall. Hundreds of photographs covered it from floor to ceiling. Not random pictures. Pictures of me. Leaving work. Shopping for groceries. Picking Noah up from school. Walking my dog. Sitting alone in cafes. Some had clearly been taken from across the street. Others, through my own living room window. Someone had been watching me. For years. I felt physically sick. Then Gavin whispered, "Marin." I turned around. He was staring at another wall. Every photograph there showed the same thing. Celeste, standing beside Noah, celebrating birthdays, opening Christmas presents, eating dinner, reading bedtime stories. The terrifying part wasn't that the pictures existed. It was that they covered almost 5 years. I walked closer. Every date was carefully written underneath. According to those photographs, Celeste had been living Noah's childhood. At the exact same time I believed I was. Then I noticed one final door at the back of the room. Unlike everything else, it was locked. A child's voice suddenly echoed from behind it, soft, almost asleep. "Mom?" Every hair on my body stood up. I looked at Gavin, he looked back at me. Neither of us breathed. The little voice came again. "Mom, is that finally you?" I grabbed the doorknob with shaking hands and slowly turned it the moment the door opened. I realized the biggest lie wasn't that someone had stolen my identity. It was that I had been searching for the wrong Noah this entire time. The doorknob slipped in my trembling hand before I finally managed to turn it. The door slowly creaked open. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. Sitting on a small bed inside the room was a little boy with messy brown hair, wearing Noah's favorite blue hoodie. He looked up at me with sleepy eyes and smiled. "Mom," he whispered. Tears instantly filled my eyes. I ran toward him without thinking. "Noah!" I wrapped my arms around him so tightly I thought I'd never let go again. He hugged me back, but only for a second. Then he slowly pulled away, studying my face with quiet confusion. "You're crying," he said. "Did she hurt you too?" My entire body froze. "Who?" I whispered. He looked toward the closed door behind me. "The other mom?" I couldn't breathe. "Noah." "What do you mean?" He lowered his eyes. "She told me I wasn't allowed to tell anyone." Gavin stepped closer. "Buddy, look at me." Noah nodded. Gavin's voice shook. "Who kept you here?" Noah answered without hesitation. "Mom." Then he looked at me. "Not you. The other one." Every word felt like a knife. "She said people were trying to steal me," Noah continued. "She told me if anyone ever said they were my real family, they were lying." Tears streamed down my face. "How long have you been here?" Noah shrugged. "Sometimes a few days, sometimes a week. Then she'd take me home again." Home. He thought this room was home. While Gavin comforted Noah, I looked around the tiny bedroom one last time. There were school books, toys, fresh clothes, even medical supplies. This wasn't a prison built overnight. It had been carefully maintained for years. Then I noticed a small red notebook lying beneath Noah's pillow. I opened it. Every page was dated. Every page was written by Celeste. They weren't diary entries. They were lessons. Day 84. Noah called me mom without hesitation. Day 173. He no longer asks about Marin. Day 291. Teachers now recognize me before they recognize her. I felt physically sick. This wasn't kidnapping. It was psychological conditioning. She hadn't tried to steal my son in one day. She had slowly rewritten his reality, one memory at a time. Just then, Detective Iris Calloway entered the storage unit with federal investigators. She carefully took the notebook from my hands and quietly said, "We've been looking for this for almost 3 years." I looked at her. "You knew?" She nodded. "Not everything. But we knew children had disappeared into false identities before." My heart stopped. "Children?" Iris sighed. Celeste wasn't working alone. She belonged to a network that targeted vulnerable families after divorces, custody battles, and financial disputes. They didn't just steal children. She looked around the room. They stole entire identities. Federal agents searched the apartment while Noah sat beside me, holding my hand tighter than ever before. For the first time in weeks, he refused to let go. 6 months later, every charge against Celeste Rowan became public. Investigators discovered 7 other hidden apartments across 3 states. 5 families were reunited with children who had been psychologically manipulated into believing complete strangers were their parents. Margaret Holloway was identified as one of the financial supporters behind the operation, using stolen corporate money to fund fake identities, forged records, and illegal custody schemes. Both women received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Gavin publicly admitted every mistake he'd made by keeping secrets, and although it took time, we slowly rebuilt the trust we'd lost. Noah spent months in therapy. Some memories came back quickly. Others returned one painful piece at a time. One evening, almost a year later, he walked into my kitchen while I was making dinner. He smiled, wrapped his arms around me, and quietly said the 2 words I'd been praying to hear again. "Hi, Mom." I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because I had finally won, but because my son had finally found his way home. Sometimes evil doesn't wear a mask. Sometimes it wears kindness, a warm smile, a trusted face. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more original family mystery, betrayal, and psychological thriller stories every week. And tell me in the comments, at what moment did you realize Celeste wasn't trying to replace Marin? She was trying to erase her completely? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next unforgettable story.